The wealth of the Western Hemisphere was built by African and indigenous people. That is the reality. And in order to do that, there had to be an institution of an ideology of the supremacy of European peoples. And that still has ramifications today. But it's not something that we just leave. I mean, if you look at all of the, if you look at these McCain rallies, actually, the McCain and the Palin rallies, and you look at the things that people are saying, the racist, ugly, sick things that people are saying, and they're getting away with for the most part. And we have said from the very beginning, this thing is going to get ugly before it's done. They have to make it so. Because part of the reason is, in order for people to not see their commonness in the struggle, you have to make them think there's some difference that makes them better than these other people. Because then you can keep people from uniting behind the fact that it's ultimately a struggle of workers. And that racism and white supremacy is used against workers in general to keep them from seeing their commonness and overthrowing this brutal, repressive system. See, as Marxists, we are revolutionary optimists. Some people look at the times and they think, well, damn, things are messed up. There's no movement in the streets. There has not been a movement in my entire life. I'm 32 years old. There hasn't been any large movements. There have been flash points. Things have come and gone. But there has not been any sustained struggle that where you can look at and say the workers are advancing. There hasn't been that in our lives. But it's coming. And you can see the seeds of it growing. Because people are waking up to saying, wait a second, there's something wrong with this. We were told that this was it. Everybody was going to be able to prosper. The only thing that was holding them back was the evil empire. It was holding back the rest of the world. Now it's gone. Everybody's going to prosper. Capitalism is going to mean gold in the streets. We're going to walk on streets paved with gold, milk, honey, meat, all you can eat, cars, houses, everything. That is capitalism will bring it. But that's not the way that the system works. And people are waking up to that reality now, and it's a very harsh reality. It's a very harsh reality. And that blood and that dirt that capital was born covered in is covered up to its neck now, and even more so than it was when it first came into the world of being. Because you can drown the world and bury the world in the blood and the dirt of capital. Because that's what it creates. Oppression through exploitation, murder, rape. That is the nature of the system. Its very nature is to be violent and to exploit. A lot of people are having a hard time understanding what is possible for human societies, because when you grow up in U.S. society, you're not taught the long view of history. You're taught a bunch of events that happen on the timeline, but there's no linkages to these things. We believe in the long view of history. And the long view of history says that times can and do change. What is now will not be tomorrow. Capitalism has not been for forever. It will not be for forever. And one of the greatest things about, and I don't know if I'm over my time, but I'm going to close pretty soon. One of the greatest things about a panel such as this is that there is a long history of not only struggle but of great leaders. And on the flyer for this meeting, we had two of the greatest, and one was one of the greatest leaders this country ever produced, and that is Malcolm X. And they don't teach Malcolm X in school. They teach Martin Luther King because they can cover stuff up, and they can pigeonhole him, and they can make him just about that, little white boys and little black boys and little white girls and little white. They can make him just be just that. They won't go into 1968 when he was talking to sanitation workers or any of that stuff. They'll just keep him in 1963. That's the Martin Luther King that we're given. But you can't do that with Malcolm. Because before Malcolm was talking about capitalism, he was talking about white devil. They don't have anything that they can go and find and say, okay, well, this is a tame Malcolm that we can present to people. There was never a tame Malcolm for them that they can present to anybody to try to cover anything up about him. But towards the end of his life, when he started to travel around the world, he developed a broader internationalist understanding of struggle. And he began, maybe he didn't quite come to understand Marxism, but he began to see that ultimately what produced the ills that were happening in that period in history and all throughout history was capitalism itself. And he talked about that. He talked about that. And he began to see beyond just the fact of the civil rights movement in the United States. He began to see a worldwide conflict of the oppressed against the oppressor, throwing off the yoke of oppression, which means you have to defeat the oppressor. And to end this cycle, because maybe the market, maybe the crisis will end at some point. They'll find some sort of way to make it end. Not before a whole lot of suffering and a lot of layoffs and wars, famines. Not before all that stuff is part of the crisis itself, and it's existed ever since capital, but it gets worse in times such as these. But it'll come again. And it'll come again, and then it'll come again. And the only way to stop the cycle, the only way to stop the ugliness, the only way to stop any other adventures like Iraq and Afghanistan, and the only way to stop the threats against Iran and the threat of attack against Venezuela and Cuba, the only way is to take the system, smash it into a billion pieces and scatter it to the wind. And in its wake, you build something based off of human solidarity and in need of people. Socialism. Socialism. You know, ultimately what socialism is the creation of an abundance. Now, not the kind of abundance when you go to a grocery store and you see a bunch of stuff. You go to a car lot, you see a bunch of cars, you see houses. Houses that are empty. Food that gets thrown away when people starve on the streets. 4 million people without homes, millions being kicked out of their homes, but there are houses for them. People who can't get to work, but there are cars for them. Under socialism, these things are owned socially. But the struggle for socialism has always been, you know, the struggle for a better world has always been societies advance off of other societies, and capitalism has outlived whatever usefulness it has ever had, and we don't have much of a planet left if capitalism were to stay on this earth and wasn't completely destroyed. So Marx was right, and he'll be right tomorrow. And even after we overthrow this system, we continue to build on that because it's dialectical. Changes come. Our understanding changes with the changes that come. And people talk about greed, and this is my last part. They talk about greed and they say, oh, well, you can't build socialism because there's such thing as human greed. Look, all ideas, the things that we think and believe, they come from a real world. They don't come from out of space somewhere. They're not existing within our own makeup in our heart somewhere, wherever our emotions and ideas come from. They don't come from in there. They come from a real world. Right? So when we destroy this system, we change the way that we think and we create a new people. Yeah. That's what socialism is. So Marx was right. There's a lot of people here. I'm excited about this meeting. Keep coming back. And, you know, I look forward to hearing the rest of the speakers. Thank you.